In this presentation, we're going to look at how the UK's economy is changing. All the economy means is the process by which goods and services are produced, sold and bought in a country or region. So economic growth is basically a country becoming more wealthy. We're going to start by looking at the employment structure of the UK and how it's changed over time. All employment structure means is the number of people doing different kinds of jobs within a country. We can classify jobs into four main sections. Primary industry is taking things out of the ground or sea. Secondary industry is making things or manufacturing. Tertiary industry is providing services. And finally, quaternary industry is research and development. So if you had a job as a cancer research scientist or a brain surgeon or a top sort of groundbreaking engineer, then you'd be quaternary industry. If we look at the UK, we can see how the employment structure has changed over time. So to summarise, since the 1800s, our primary industry has rocketed downwards. Our secondary industry grew up to a peak during the late 1800s and then has declined. Tertiary industry, the service sector, has increased and then is starting to plateau out. And quaternary industry has shot upwards since about the 1980s. Now let's have a think why. We'll start with primary industry. During the 1800s, most people are working on farms, agriculture. People are mining, taking things out of the ground to feed the industrial revolution, such as coal. So lots and lots of primary industry. But over time, now most agriculture goes on in other countries, and we're buying, importing food from elsewhere. Likewise, if we want sources of coal or raw materials, it's actually cheaper to buy them from abroad because of the low labour costs. Also, we're running out of coal that's easy to get to, which is another reason why it can be mined more cheaply abroad. Now, if we go on to secondary industry, the rise in secondary industry occurred during the Industrial Revolution, where lots of workers were needed in factories such as textiles, steel products and ships. But again, there's been a decline more recently because we've now got machinery. Mechanisation has meant that fewer workers are needed, and also because we can buy products cheaply from abroad. If we look at the service sector, which flew upwards and then is starting to plateau, as cities have grown, demand for jobs in schools, hospitals, shops, service jobs has increased. And also, as a country becomes more advanced, it wants to concentrate on quality of life. And so if we have hospitals, shops, jobs in schools, etc., looking after people, that improves the quality of life of people within the country. And next thing we're going to look at is how people's working hours have changed in the UK since 2001, because that's a year where we've got the census data from. Fathers work fewer hours these days. More mothers are in full-time work these days. More households have two full-time workers. It changed from 25% in 2001 to 29% in 2011. And people are working more flexible hours through part-time work, flexi-time, job sharing, working from home. Now, the fathers working fewer hours matches perfectly upwards with more mothers are in full-time work, and it's because more fathers are taking a share of looking after the children. So it's not necessarily fathers being more lazy, it's more fathers are wanting to help with the housework and look after the children to support the more mothers who are working. More households have two full-time workers. This is just to afford a good standard of living. And then following the credit crunch of 10 or so years ago, more families need two full-time workers to afford what they want in life. Growth of the road network and use of the internet means that more people want to work from home. And also, with more mothers and fathers working and needing to look after children, more part-time work and flex-time work and job sharing is now the norm. Let's have a look and see how the UK's political priorities have changed over time. Now this concentrates on the period between 2001 and 2011, which is where the OCRB syllabus looks at the political priorities. So the government wants economic growth, which means they want an increase in the amount of goods and services being produced. Why? Because then the nation becomes wealthier. If the nation is wealthier and we're producing more goods, it means that more people have jobs. This increases people's earnings, which in turn increases consumer spending in the country. That's what the government want. So here are some events that have occurred between 2001 and 2011 and the government's response, their political priorities. In 1997 and 2007, we had really strong economic growth and unemployment decreased. It's because the government's priorities were to invest in computing and invest in university education, with the thinking that if we've got a more skilled workforce, the country will earn more money. Unfortunately, in 2008, the UK entered a recession, businesses failed, growth slowed and unemployment rose, and so the government had to change its priorities. They put lots of money into businesses so that they didn't collapse, leading to more unemployment. They decreased taxes on goods to try and encourage people to spend and trade, because that would bring money in. And they borrowed lots of money from private companies and from abroad to finance what they were doing. In 2009, the recession ended, and then the government has to focus on paying off all of the money that was borrowed to cope with the recession. So what were the new political priorities? Well, to cut spending on public services, so less money going into the armed forces, less money going into schools, less money going into pensions, and also they provided training for job seekers and support for businesses to decrease unemployment. Now, since then and recently, there's obviously been the COVID outbreak from 2019 onwards. So what would the UK's political priorities be? It's spending billions of pounds, keeping their country healthy, all the campaigning and all the scientific research. And unfortunately, when the COVID catastrophe is over, then the government are going to have to focus on paying off the money that they have borrowed again. So there'll be more cutting public services, more looking for ways to get people into employment. This next section is on economic hubs. Now, in the past, large regions of the UK generated economic growth. And some of the regions of the UK became famous. So Wales became famous for coal mining, steel and sheep farming, etc. London was famous for finance and commerce, and the North East was famous for coal mining and shipbuilding. But this has now changed. Nowadays, the largest economic growth is in certain cities or parts of cities, and these are known as economic hubs. This map shows some of the UK's economic hubs and what is going on there. So, for example, Bicester Village near Oxford has a huge retail development, a major tourist attraction. People go there for their shopping. Swansea is an economic hub. It has everything to do with driving and licensing of vehicles through the DVLA, and Amazon is located there. If you go to Salford, it has Media City with the BBC and ITV studios, other creative industries. So these are some of the cities or parts of cities that are generating economic wealth at the moment. To have an economic hub, and they're mainly tertiary and quaternary industries, they need a young and educated workforce nearby, especially at a university. The educated workforce means they can be at the cutting edge of design and technology and industry. The young workforce means they're fresh out of university with new ideas, but also it means they're not too expensive to employ. Good transport connections by road, rail and air mean that you can easily get raw materials in, products out, and it's easy for your workforce to travel to work. And growth in businesses, jobs, homes and offices, the multiplier effect, encourages changing, sharing of ideas and economic growth. Let's have a look at an example, which is the Oxford Economic Hub. The Oxford Economic Hub is located a very good situation because the M40 runs just by Oxford going down to London. The M4 is to the south of Oxford, and there's also lots of airports nearby such as Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, Luton, and so transport is very, very easy. You've got some of the top universities, not only in England, in the world, with Oxford and Oxford Brookes nearby, Cambridge not too far away, and it's estimated 1,500 high-tech companies are there within the Oxford region, such as Unilever. These companies employ 43,000 people, contribute hugely to local and national economy with world-class universities. Now here's some examples of what's going on in the Oxford Economic Hub. It's got Harwell campus, for example, a new space telescope being developed there. It's got Milton Park. The biotech company Immunocore Limited is developing breakthrough therapies for cancer and viral diseases. Now, the impact of this on the local area is as more people come into work, there'll be more congestion and pollution on the roads, but also the extra people will be looking for houses, which raises house prices within the area. As the area gets more wealthy, there'll be more consumer spending, which increases incomes of shopkeepers within the local area, and then the whole area becomes more wealthy.